Hey guys, welcome to another review of The Chosen. So today we're going to be talking about episode 4 of season 4, which is titled The Calm Before. So this episode is very much about the fallout of episode 3, which was obviously, spoilers, the death of Rayma, who was destined to be marrying Thomas. She is killed at the end of that episode, and so now this episode very much picks up where it left off, dealing with the fallout of how Thomas and all the disciples and Jesus are handling her death and what she meant, not necessarily what she meant to them, but rather what her death means to them and how they are all processing grief in different ways and how do they handle it. But then the bigger question arises throughout this whole episode is why, starting off with, why didn't Jesus save her? Why didn't he bring her back to life or heal her? But at the same time, why is he healing other people? And they very much contrast this pretty early on, where they show him just walking down the street casually and they bump into a blind man and he heals him then and there, and they bumps into another person, heals them then and there. And then obviously the culmination of this whole episode is you have a whole plot with Gaius, the Roman who works in Capernaum, and he's very sympathetic now to Jesus and the disciples and is friendly with them. And he has a son who is ailing and who is sick, and he comes to Jesus at the end and, gets on his knees before him and is just begging him for and showing his true faith in what he believes that Jesus can do to save his son. And Jesus grants him essentially his wish, his prayers, and heals his son without even having to lay a hand on him. And so the disciples, just that question just keeps getting raised by them, is that why is he granting these things to people who seemingly have nothing to do with Jesus? Meanwhile, they're right there for him, and they have issues of their own, desires of their own, and he is not granting it for them. We've seen this a number of times with a number of characters, with the little James, and now you had John who was asking something of him, and you've had Simon obviously dealing with the grief of his wife and losing their baby in the previous season. All these things that they've had issues with, and that Jesus has not saved them for. And Jesus never really explicitly answers the question for them, but what we can basically determine from bits and pieces that he said to them here and there is that they are essentially, whilst he's anointed Simon as the rock, they are all part of the foundation of what is going to be his new church and kingdom, right? And so what he is basically saying is that he has destined so much for them. He's putting so much into them responsibility-wise as to what they're going to do, that the only way he can truly measure, or I guess get them to believe in their faith, is to, I guess, sadly deny them and yet still have to follow Jesus anyways. Because if they can continue to believe in a man who doesn't meet their every need, then that will inherently build a stronger faith. And that is the key principle here, is that yes, what they are doing is going to echo throughout generations, and they need to be fortified, and they need to be strong enough to deal with the fact that they are going to endure great hardships, terrible things will happen to them, but they are serving a greater purpose, and Jesus needs them to do that, because we know what the apostles are going to represent. They are the ones who are essentially going to branch out and spread the word once Jesus is gone, and he knows this, but he can't quite communicate that to them, even though he hints at it here and there. But it's really beautiful stuff, because it's that age-old question that we all ask ourselves in our everyday lives, is why does God let bad things happen to good people, or vice versa, why do good things happen to bad people? It's not about either of those. It's about the treasure that we are building in heaven by the deeds that we do on this earth, regardless of what happens to us. Whether good things happen to us, we should address those with equal goodness. If bad things happen to us, we should also address that with goodness and embrace all the tenets that Jesus preaches to us that we should do. So it's really great stuff, this episode. It's a very deep and emotional episode. You see Jesus at his absolutely most emotional and almost at his wit's end. He gets to a part towards the end of the episode where he's exceedingly frustrated with the disciples and them asking him for something, and he doesn't, and it kind of represents him that they don't quite understand what they're doing yet, and they've frustrated him. And that shows the human side of Jesus, because whilst he is God, he is also flesh and blood, and that he's half and half in terms of those things. So it's really great stuff to see, and I thought it was a phenomenal episode that dealt with it. It kind of spends the first half tailored around Rayma's passing and how they're dealing with that, but then that kind of transitions into the overall theme of kind of good things happening to bad people, or good, some people getting healed and some people not being healed, kind of just transitioning that whole, using Rhaema's death to kind of talk about this more broader topic, and obviously culminating in Gaius and him and Jesus embracing after Jesus saves his son. So it's beautiful episode. I thought it was really great and dealt with those really difficult questions that we still ask ourselves to this day. And so definitely loved it. I really enjoyed it, and we're halfway through the season now, so I'm looking forward to the second half. Don't want it to end, but at the same time can't wait for the next episodes as they come out. So another great episode in my opinion. And that's my review of episode 4 of season 4 of The Chosen.